Hey guys, and welcome back to Building Gunpla for Cheap. This is the project that I'm doing with JustiniusBuilds, where we're going to be showing you guys how to basically build a Gunpla or a really nice Gundam model for less than $100. So in the first video I went over everything that I'm going to be using for this project and basically all of that's going to fit into my $100 budget. And in this video we're going to be going over just the building process. So this doesn't really have too much to do with the cost, but it's just how to use, or basically how I'm going to use some of the tools that I bought. So again, I'm not going to be using anything that I didn't include in that first video. So I didn't include a cutting mat, so we're going to be getting rid of that. A cheap alternative that you can use, and that I used to use like 15 years ago when I first started out in Gunpla building, is just this. What I've basically done is taken a cereal box and cut off the flaps and folded it inside out, and just some tape around the outside, and just we've got a simple protective surface basically, so when we're cutting and doing anything we've got just a nice clean surface we can use for all of that. So first thing I'm going to do is just take out my stuff. Actually, we're going to take out the foil stickers because we're not going to use those at all, so we're just going to put those to the side. Take out my poly caps. I'll keep those out separate, and just stand up the runners in alphabetical order in the box. Actually, the instructions are in the box, which I don't think I'm really going to need, but just in case I don't want to miss anything, I'll keep my instructions out separately over here to the side, and I've got all my parts here. So these parts, if I can show you here, they're a little bit different from most kits where there isn't really much of a nub there. These are made to just be able to pull off the runner, but they don't pull off that easily. So I think I still want to use nippers if I can, just to be able to avoid doing more work cleaning up later. I think it's still best to try to use nippers, I think, and then just clean that up the normal way. So I'm going to go ahead and just snap up the kit first, and then we'll see from there what we need to do in terms of making it better with the tools that we have. So here I go. Okay, so here's all of our parts. I usually never do this, just cut out all the parts first and then just kind of go from there. I really don't recommend you ever do that. I'm just doing it in this case just because it's such a simple kit. I'm sure I'll be perfectly fine without mixing up any of the parts, but either way, I never recommend you to actually really do that, like if it's anything other than a first grade. Even a high grade, it's still best to just work just as you go through the instructions. Just cut out the parts you need as you go along. It's just the best way to do it, unless it's a kit like that you've built 30 times or even like 3 or 4 times. Then you probably don't really need the instructions. But anyway, my point is just generally don't do it like this. I'm just doing it for the speed of going through this. Now I'm gonna go ahead and just snap everything together. So here we have our snapped up Curious Gundam. As we can tell, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I mean, it doesn't look half bad. It's definitely got quite a lot of details there that we're going to be able to work with. But it's definitely going to take quite a bit of painting, and that's why I wanted to be sure to get a couple different colors for our main sprays, and then a couple different enamel colors we're going to be using as well. Now obviously I need to go in and actually clean up these nub marks a little bit more because I didn't actually cut or sand any of those nubs very well. So you just need to go back and do that first and foremost. Here's our weapons. The shield, without the arm being able to rotate at all, the shield just plugs into the back of the arm, so it's going to have a lot of trouble with this thing there, but we are just able to plug that on there. I think like that on the back of the arm. There we go. And then the rifle is just gonna go in the hand pretty simply like that. So I mean, not bad, pretty simple kit. As long as it is able to pull off a pretty decent looking pose when it's all said and done, that's all that really matters, despite its lack of very much articulation. It does have some, so we can do quick little cool pose like that. I think should definitely be good enough when it's all painted up. It'll look pretty nice. So okay, so after a bit of work just cleaning it up, here's just what the kit is going to look like before we get into doing any sort of painting, priming, or anything added onto the kit. And I apologize if there's some background noise. There's a man outside with a fruit truck selling some fruit or something, I think, and the loudspeakers echoing all over the place in the area. Anyway, yeah, so what I did, I just got rid of the seam lines. I ended up not using the putty. I used a technique of just using the glue and some sandpaper. Actually, what I decided to do, even my first video I showed I was going to use sandpaper. I decided instead of using sandpaper, it was just easier to use sanding sticks. So the cost is about the same, just switch out the sandpaper for a set of sanding sticks as well. These are just, I think, 800 grit sanding sticks. So these were just well enough. Just using these in combination with just my knife was good enough to do what I wanted to do for this. So I'll show you exactly what I did for that in just a minute. Other things that I did was just sanding down the back of the V-fin and these yellow bits on the top of the chest. Those had like the little flag on the end of there. Just cut that off with my nippers and then just sanded that down. If you want to see more detail about how to do that, it's pretty simple, but I did show about how to do that in the Gunpla building video in the past before. I can't remember which number that is, but you'll just have to check it out. Anyway, it's simple. Just cut the flag with nippers and then just sand it with a sanding stick till the back of that part is flat. So again, pretty simple anyway. So from here, it's basically ready to paint. We're basically just gonna go in and just do primer everywhere, and then we're gonna spray our main colors, and then we're gonna go in and just use the enamel paints to do our accent colors and things like that. So I think we're not gonna use the putty at all. We could, I suppose, use the putty to maybe like fill in the bottom of the feet or something like that. That doesn't really matter. I mean, it's a first grade. I'm not really too worried about that. Or like here in the back of the shield, that is really supposed to be filled in, but I think we'll be okay in this case. We're not going for this to be like totally 100% anime accurate, considering I'm changing the colors as well. But you'll notice some seam lines I did leave on here, like on these parts on the shoulders. I can go ahead and just take this apart now just to show you in a little bit better detail. The parts of the shoulder armor just have to go on top of the arm piece. So if you can see here, like this, the arm, the shoulder pieces are going to have to go around the arm. So what I mean is that if I want to paint this, if I want to get rid of that seam line, that means like I have to glue this together, and then that's going to be permanently attached on the arm, which is fine. It wouldn't be too hard to just spray around there on the arm and then like mask that for spraying the shoulder armor. Wouldn't really be too difficult, or it would not be too difficult to just do a little bit of cutting in this circular part, just cut out a little bit of that so that this is able to just like slot into there. But again, I think what we're going to do, considering that the seam line on the shoulder armor is not really that bad, here on the top we can see there's a bit of a seam on the top part there. Then this part, like for most of there, it's mostly hidden. Then we can see it there at the edge, and then underneath we can see the seam there as well. But it's really not that bad. I'm willing to live with that, considering I'm going to be painting this part in here a darker gray as well, so it's really not going to be all that visible at all. It's just going to look like kind of mechanical detail anyway, I think. So That seam line I left, and there's a couple areas on the backpack where I left the seam line. I'll show you if I can get this on. Well, screw it. Anyway, on the backpack, I got rid of the seam line in some areas, and some areas I didn't. For example, you can see it's still a little bit rough. Might have to clean it up a little bit more still, but the indented part in the center, I didn't get rid of the seam line there, just because with the tools that I'm using, I just don't really have the ability to do that. But on the parts where it's flat, I was able to just get rid of the seam line there, and then in here, this part as well, but not inside there. So again, it's okay. The seam line is going to be visible in some areas. Here is underneath as well, but underneath it's really not going to be that visible because it's like down like that. So the seam line is gone in a lot of areas, in some areas not, but I think it's definitely going to be just fine for now. I did run into a little bit of a problem on the leg here, on these parts on the ankle. There's a little bit of an indent here, but like getting rid of the seam on the front, I lost that detail kind of, so I had to scratch it out a little bit with my pen, not with my pen, with my knife, to try to get it straight, but just doing that with the knife, of course, it wasn't all that straight. I think it's gonna be okay, and you can't really see it now. You'll see it once I have primer on here. But I don't know, hopefully that will look alright. It shouldn't be too bad. The seams on the legs were pretty simple, and on the arms as well weren't too bad. So I think, the big test is always when you put primer on it. Primer will show you just how good or how bad you did on that stuff. So in the next video we'll cover the priming and painting of this kit and all of that, detailing. So it will probably be a little bit longer, that part of the video. And then the final part, we'll just take a look at the final kit. Again, thank you guys for watching, and definitely be sure to check out Justin's videos as well. I'll show you quickly now. Let me just grab a piece of paper. Okay, so say this is the surface of your part. You want it to be flat like that, right? But the surface as it is, there's a seam, so there's a little bit of a thing like that, right? So there's a little, that's our seam line with the level of the part. So we want to fill that basically. So what we would normally do if we have putty, we just fill the putty, and then we have a little bit of putty left over, so it's kind of filling in like that, something like that, right? That's our putty. Then when we sand that down, we're basically left with the level like that. It's level, and then the putty is filling in that space. Well, what I did, which is a pretty cheap and not really the best way to do it, but it can work in some situations. I don't really advise it. I recommend using putty and doing it the right way, but this is what I did and kind of how I messed up on this part here. So you'll be able to see that when I get the primer on there. So here we have a part, like in this case, here's the shape of our part. There's a small indent in the side like that, and then here's the seam, and then the indent on the other side as well, like that. So this is the edge of our part, right? That ankle part here. And what I did, I just put glue on this. So there's glue, and the glue fills in the seam a little bit, like that, and then another layer of glue. It fills in the seam a little bit more, but then we're still going to have a little bit of an indent there. So just sanding that and sanding that and sanding that, the whole top of that, you're getting to have less and less of an indent here on the side, if that's making sense. So that was the problem. I sanded it so much that this this little indent here is basically almost lost. So I had to kind of like dig that out again a little bit. So if this crude drawing makes sense to you, then yeah. So okay, so basically sanding that, what you can do, what I did and what you can do, again, I recommend using multiple levels of your sandpaper, like 400, then 800, then 1200 or something like that, or even just 800, then 1200. But since I only have 800, I sanded it with 800, but that still leaves it a little bit too coarse. I think it could be okay, but just to make it softer, or at least smoother, then what I did is just go over it with a hobby knife. The edge of the hobby knife is flat, so if you just drag the edge of the hobby knife across the top of the part, it's going to basically just like sort of like just scraping the part. If the part's flat, it like does an okay job. Again, it's better to use sandpaper and do it the correct way, but you can just kind of scrape the part with the hobby knife is one way to smooth that out a little bit more. So we'll see how it looks when the primer's on there. It should be okay, but again, I don't recommend you really use that technique unless you are doing something really for cheap like this. If you have the money, just use putty and use multiple levels of sandpaper. It's going to be for the best effect. But why don't we end this video now, and then in the next part of the video we'll see this kit get primed and painted, and then see how I did on those seams. So anyway, thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.